Okay, sort of moving towards the end of, I think, a couple of sort of future gazing questions, which are always fun, and then maybe a little bit of advice. But if we can start, fairly broad question, but in terms of trends you see that will be shaping, then I guess what we might call the next generation of BCDR solutions, I don't know, over the next three to 5 years, what can we expect?
I mean, yeah, I haven't got my crystal ball with me, but I think you know, anyone that's looked at my LinkedIn profile will know that I'm pretty fanatical about AI and what it's gonna bring in terms of opportunities for organizations. And I think the utilization of these platforms is such where so many organizations are plowing so much critical data into these systems that the AI applications will be the next SaaS applications that need the level of protection that now a Microsoft 365 and a Google Workspace has. Because organizations are implementing these technologies in anger as the anchors of all of their processes. So many of organizational systems are now flowing from one application through an AI platform into another application to increase the productivity of their businesses, that actually the data residing within those AI applications are going to become really important to ensure you've got obviously security policies and backup solutions in place for. So I think that's going to be one. I think we're going to see more unification of the way in which organizations are using backup technologies. I think progressively over time we'll see the way in which organizations are deploying backup solutions, where it's being managed, how it's being pulled together, will start unifying more and more to the point that you truly have one backup solution and it protects everything. So that's an inevitability in terms of driving more automation, more unification, more efficiency potential in the way that these services are being delivered. But yeah, I think AI is going to be the big one. Being honest, I think so many organizations are now plowing so much critical business IP into these platforms to make more and more decisions on how to move their businesses forward. And obviously those conversations are going to become really, really valuable. And you will see cyber attacks on those types of platforms and potential data loss. So the same levels of protection, both in front of and behind those applications, are going to be critical over the next few years, is my bet. I'm sure other people have different opinions, but I think that's absolutely the way we're going.
No, that's fine. I mean, on a related note, do you think that things like NIS2 and other regulations may well change SMBs' approaches to continuity planning into the future? Is that likely to happen?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is. As I sort of mentioned previously, I think this too is going to see more and more consistent scrutiny of organizational ability to recover than we've ever seen before across most other compliance standards outside of the really heavily regulated industries. So NIS2 as an example stipulates that organizations over a certain size or a certain turnover have to adhere to this standard. But what a lot of organizations don't see or haven't looked into the detail of is actually it has knock-on ramifications of associated organizations as well. So just because your business sits under that threshold, if you transact with organizations that sit over that threshold, you are then beholden to that standard as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of shake-up in the industry, and obviously it's going to come out in mainland Europe first, but as all these things do, it will then have the wider bearing implications for other areas of the globe. And I think if you transact with mainland European accounts or organizations or businesses, you're going to then have that knock-on requirement to adhere to a certain level of standards. And business continuity is prevalent in multiple different areas of that legislation. Just in the same way that GDPR got everybody talking about, have I got data? Am I keeping it for long enough? Is it recoverable? How can I, pick it apart? This, that, and the other. NIS2 is going to have exactly the same impact, and so on and so forth, as will the next regulation and the next regulation. And we are a global economy now, so just because these standards come out in Europe or in North America or wherever it might be, the knock-on impact for almost every organization on the planet now is a level of adherence requirement. So I think NIS2 will be shaking a lot of organizations' mindsets around backup up, certainly over the next 18 months to 2 years. Absolutely.
Okay, and then in terms of MSPs sort of tracking, measuring the success and the ROI of their BCDR offerings, are there some standard KPIs that they can use just to work out how well they are or aren't doing?
Well, yeah, I think there are multiple different calculators available. You can access them through the Kaseya website that allow you to look at what the cost offset is by implementing a business continuity solution. So, what the cost to that organization would have been in a situation where they didn't have this versus what it will now be on the basis you do have this. So, what does it cost your business to go from a week's worth of downtime to an hour's worth of downtime? And those are staggering. And in some instances, in terms of the cost opportunity saving for the end user organization in terms of offsetting that downtime period. But I think managed service providers should absolutely be tracking what the return on investment is in terms of the internal efficiency saving from implementing, unified, integrated and automated business continuity systems, because the conventional backup solutions that required that manual intervention, if that was one technician's job for an entire day to fail over a data set onto a redundant server and check that backup is holding its integrity and is a viable solution to get a customer back up and running, and that responsibility has been completely offset by implementing a system where that process is automated, and you're doing that across 50 customers, that's probably 2 full-time employees that are now focusing on revenue generating opportunities for your business. So, there is a staggering potential in terms of cost saving by implementing automated solutions. And the way in which it's measured is obviously down to the organization in which has implemented it, but it should be considered additional value for their businesses, because it is a significant monetary opportunity in simply repurposing an existing resource onto other cost saving or revenue generating opportunities internally.
Couple more. The first one would be around MSPs helping or preparing their customers. I mean, we've talked about sort of hybrid, multi-location data storage with endpoints, SaaS, cloud, on-prem, etc. How can they sort of prepare customers for that reality or help them with it? But there's more complexity. So are you able to remove the managing that complexity, or can you optimize it? I suppose, yeah. How complicated or not should it be for MSP customers when they have this hybrid environment? Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I think we need to have outcome-driven conversations. So many years ago, I was working with a managed service provider, and they actually called themselves a managed application provider. We're not an MSP, we're a MAP, because we provide just the applications that customers need. And then we take care of all of the infrastructure and the foundations of those applications in the background. We make sure they're secured. We make sure they're recoverable. But as far as the customer's concerned, they pay us for the applications that they use. And that at the time, it was a really good outcome-driven proposition. Rather than going into organizations and saying, right, so you've got this many users and each of them need Adobe on their MacBooks and they need this and they need that and what have you. And then you've got, 70% Windows and the piecemeal approach to an a la carte managed service subscription is no more. So I think the outcome-driven focus in the way that managed service providers are providing their services through standardization of systems, through productization of services, should be driving towards end customer experience being improved despite or in spite of the fact that we're in a world where systems and data is now completely disparate. So yeah, absolutely. What they need for their SaaS applications and for their endpoint machines and for their server infrastructure will be very different. And it's down to the managed service providers to ensure that those systems are in place. And that spans out to, the ability to monitor the dark web, to run, cybersecurity awareness training, to penetration testing, to secure edge for remote user access to internal networks. Like all of these different facets of what a overall security posture should look like for an organization now are the responsibility of managed service providers. But if it's done in a way that is unified, integrated, automated, and streamlined into a central management system, the impact to the end user should just be you're protected on the front end, your production machines are productive, and you're recoverable in any scenario across every asset of your current IT estate. But that's where we are in the world in terms of managed service providers being able to, implement technologies that streamline the approach to, hyper security focus on every different area of IT and maximum recovery at a speed that unconventionally would have required a high availability system implementation with almost no consideration or impact for the end user organization that's consuming that service from that managed service provider.
Brilliant. And the final question, with all we've talked about, is there one or are there one or two key pieces of advice you would give to an MSP who's either just starting to build a comprehensive BCDR offering, or perhaps more likely they have some kind of offering already, but they're aware, bear in mind what we discussed, that it needs to be made fit for purpose, shall we say, for the new landscape with all the different threats plus the AI already having an impact. Is it easy to distill everything into one or two key pieces of advice, or what can you tell folks?
Yeah, I think focus on having outcome-driven conversations is one of the key elements in terms of what we're going to give you in terms of a recovery point and recovery time objective with this technology. Rather than going into the weeds of starting with backup and then looking at the recovery process and then looking at the business continuity process, just simplifying the solution to the point that Mr. and Mrs. Customer, this is just going to address your needs in terms of data loss and downtime. Don't worry, we've got your back. Because I think the more that you can take away or alleviate the concerns of the end user organization, the more they entrust you to provide that service. So with this system, you're going to experience up to an hour's worth of downtime and up to 2 hours worth of data loss. That in its simplest form is an outcome-driven conversation, rather than going, so actually what we're going to do is we're going to provide you a 4 terabyte local appliance. It's going to be configured into your local network. That's then going to replicate snapshots to the cloud every 2 hours. And in a situation where there's a disaster scenario, we can either virtualize you local on the appliance or spin you up in the cloud. We're actually going to manually check this once a quarter by virtualizing. Like, customers don't need to know that. They need to know that we're going to get you back up and running in 2 hours, and you're never going to lose more than 2 hours worth of data, or whatever it might be. And then I think the other side of it, from an internal business perspective, is productizing services. Make the services more consumable for your customers. And that explicitly outlines exactly what that customer is expecting as part of that service, and removes any ambiguity in a situation where there's conflict. Because so often we see organizations who, they've implemented a backup solution many, many years ago. And when I say pretty candidly, so does your customer believe that they've got a business continuity solution in place, in terms of if the brown stuff hits the fan and their systems go down, they're not going to be waiting weeks and weeks for that system to come back up? And they said, well, in reality, they might do. They just assume that we've got their back, and it's going to be a hell of a lot of manual work for us to do that. So I think, in a world where so many organizations are now being compelled and constrained by compliance standards, legal standards, cyber insurance requirements, organizations just need to be very explicit at where their responsibilities start and stop. And productizing the services allows for, an incredible amount of upsell opportunity. So, Mr. Customer, actually, if you want our X package, it's going to come with this. But you mentioned previously that you need that, therefore you're going to need to buy this instead. So, but again, it removes any level of uncertainty, fear, risk in the mind of the managed service provider and the end user organization as well. So that's probably my two pieces: outcome driven conversations and service productization. Are probably my two pieces.